I'd like to share a short Dharma talk with you now. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, Shinran's birthday is May 21st. Yeah, and so this is actually his 847th birthday, and I believe there will be a big ceremony coming up in 2023, which will be his 850th birthday celebration. It's going to be coordinated with our Honzan, so you know, mark it on your calendars. There'll be a separate celebration that the Honzan will have, and then there will be one that the North American District will put on. We're in the planning stages for that right now. But let me see. Let me go back to my screen share here. So this is the celebration of Shinran Shonen's birthday. Oops, wait a minute. Wrong slide. Okay. You know, at our last Wednesday night study class, we discussed a handout, which was on the life of Shinran. And this was done in preparation for today's service in honor of his birthday. You know, of course, you know, going over his this handout on his life, there's you know, many highlights from his life. But today I wanted to discuss what I think is one of Shinran's most well-known statements, if also one of his least understood statements. But this is the statement that he said that about himself, that he considered himself to be neither priest nor lay, or neither monk nor lay. But I'll use the term priest. Neither priest nor lay, not a priest and not a lay person. And he makes a statement when he was, as many of you know, he was exiled to Echigo at the age of 35. And at that time, the Pure Land Sangha, you know, that he was a member of, the Sangha of his teacher, Honen Shonin, had come under attack from the authorities of the day. There were various reasons, but I think mainly this attack on the Pure Land Sangha was due to the radically different teachings of Honen himself. And Shinran's exile, you know, actually involved not only an exile to a remote area, which Echigo was, but it was a forced return to lay life. Or to put another way, Shinran was, you know, as we say, defrocked. He was stripped of his priest ordination. And so as one of the Shin scholars, Dennis Hirota, says, quote, "This sudden removal from Kyoto, then the capital of Japan, to the harsh reality of daily life in the countryside, opened up for Shinran a new dimension of human existence. There, having to farm his own food and brave the harsh weather of the Echigo area, he entered deeply into mundane life for the first time. In this period, Shinran begins to speak of himself as neither priest nor lay. He kept his priest robes, which acknowledged his continued aspiration for enlightenment, but at the same time, he had been branded a criminal and deprived of recognition as a priest." So Shinran's exile and his statement of neither priest nor lay then becomes one of the cornerstones of the Sangha that later, you know, grows around him after he's pardoned. But actually, you know, thinking about this statement of Shinran's, it brought back memories of my own experience of becoming a priest. Of course, you know, Shinran's statement, you know, comes after he just lost his status as a priest, whereas my experience happened during the time I was entering the Shin priesthood. But I think that in either case, I hope you'll see the relevance of Shinran's statement of neither priest nor lay to, of course, to Shinran, but also to me. And so back in 2010, I was training for my Tokudo. Tokudo is the priest or first ordination. And then I was also receiving training for the Kyoshi or teacher ordination that would eventually follow it. So, in Higashi Honganji, also in Nishi Honganji, you have to receive Tokudo, or first ordination as a priest, and then you can go on to receive your second, or Kyoshi, or teacher ordination. Here's a photo taken at the Betsuin of one of the training sessions that I attended before receiving Tokudo. So this is a group of Higashi Honganji teachers and trainees, and so also involved in the training were Fred Brennan, Ted Shimizu, and Shig Morita. The latter two, Ted and Shig, had already received Tokudo. Sadly, I think as some of you know, Shig passed away before he was able to complete his training. But in the photo, in the front row from left to right, you see Rinban, Bishop Ito, Fred Brennan, Dr. Michihiro Ama, who was one of our teachers, and Reverend Patty Nakai, who was also one of our teachers, myself, and Shig Morita. And in the back row, you see Steve Torishima, who was actually at that time auditing the class, as many of you know, Steve is now fully ordained minister over in the Hawaii district. And then Reverend Ryoko Osa, Reverend Ken Yamada, Reverend Paul Imahara, Reverend Nobuko Miyoshi, Reverend Ted Shimizu, Bishop Noriaki. I think was he the bishop at that time? I'm sure Ito Sensei will correct me, but Imai Sensei may not have been the bishop at that time, but he was previous bishop of North American District, and then Reverend Tomoyuki Hasagawa. So these are the people that I trained with at that time. It's a very historic photo, I think you'll agree. And then, hold your breath. This is a picture of me right after I received Tokudo at the Honzan. Okay, you can brief now. So this is the picture that was taken right after Fred and I actually received Tokudo. So after I'd come back from receiving Tokudo, I experienced my own kind of difficulty. Of course, my difficulty was nothing like the kind of I guess you could say humiliation and trauma that Shinran experienced upon being stripped of his priest ordination. But I think my difficulty did share one thing with Shinran's, which is that my difficulty occurred because of a radical change in status. Shinran was no longer officially a priest, and in my case, I was just becoming one, but a radical change nonetheless. And the experience that I had is one that I still remember to this day. And what it was that on my first day back at West Covina Buddhist Temple, at West Covina Buddhist Temple Sunday service as a priest, of course, I'd been a lay member there at the temple for 20 or so years, and I had participated in countless services and retreats, seminars, and meetings and obons, with my friends. But then on this particular morning, suddenly there I was, showing up wearing the robes of a priest, and I sensed that some of my longtime Sangha friends, found my newly acquired robes, a bit problematic or off-putting. And I was really surprised and actually dismayed, when one fellow who was, usually the most friendly and gregarious guy, kind of uncharacteristically, said to me, "Well, what do we call you now?" And, I remember thinking, gosh, are these black robes creating some kind of dualistic separation, between me and my friend? And so this sense of separation, newfound separation from my friends, then made me reflect upon, what Shinran meant when he had, said, when he had referred to himself as neither priest nor lay. I think Shinran's remark is difficult to understand because it challenges our normal sort of, dualistic labels like priest and lay. You have priest and lay, and yet my understanding is that this statement actually expresses a deep understanding, a deep insight on Shinran's part of the actual non-duality, non-dualistic nature, non-dualistic, or actually non-duality or no difference between priest and lay. And so one way of understanding this concept of non-duality is that, the robes that a priest wears, rather than separating him or her from the Sangha, these robes actually represent the Buddha's teachings themselves. And so in this sense, they actually symbolize not a separation, but that whether we are a priest or a layperson, whatever our status is, all of us are ultimately part of this same interconnected, transcendent reality, right? And so, for the robes of a priest to sort of, begin or initiate a sense of separation is not what the robes are really standing for, to put it in English. But then, also, I've thought about this statement of neither priest nor lay, and I think I've come to understand another, I guess, related significance of Shinran's remark. So I think that the idea of being neither priest nor lay is also what we would call a cornerstone of the basic egalitarian nature of the Jodo Shinshu or Shin Buddhist Sangha. So, in other words, it doesn't just relate to my personal understanding as a priest. It's relevant to the entire Sangha. And I think this egalitarian spirit historically, it went against the highly dualistic structure of medieval Japan. So I think you probably know that in medieval Japan, the society was in fact characterized by a strong separation between priests and lay. It was like a classical monastic model, or maybe even like a caste system in a sense, because it was really only the priests that could attain enlightenment. The lay people were supposed to support the monasteries and the priests, and really, in a sense, had no hope of attaining enlightenment. This is what was so radical about Honin's Sangha. But moreover, the roots of Shinran's statement of neither priest nor lay were, I think, you could say that they were actually established even before he made this remark in Echigo. Even before that Echigo statement, he had already received this idea of non-duality, and it was while he was a student under the guidance of Honen Shonin. And this is because, when Shinran joined Honin's Sangha in 1201, I believe, Honin's Sangha was already noted for its egalitarian nature. And during the time that Shinran was there, it was in fact, rapidly growing. And so, as I mentioned, this is one reason, maybe this is the primary reason why the Pure Land Sangha had come under attack from the powers that be. They were threatened by the increased popularity of Honin's egalitarian spirit. So I want to share with you here a vignette or episode from the book known as The Seeker. So this book here, some of you, I think you've probably seen this book before. It's available through the Shinshu Center of America at the temple. I think in the vignette that I want to share with you, you'll see that the insight that leads to this egalitarian spirit is something that Shinran actually received from his teacher Honen. This particular vignette concerns a famous controversy that had arisen in Honen Sangha. This controversy was regarding the question of whether or not someone's faith, by the way, faith, we usually refer to it as like a deep trust or understanding. Um, the controversy was whether someone's faith would vary depending on whether it's the faith of the teacher or the faith of a follower. I think that what this vignette clarifies is really essentially another one of the one of the underlying principles of our Pure Land tradition. And this underlying principle is known as the teaching in Japanese, known as the teaching of Tariki, Tariki. Tariki, or power beyond the self, is like the fundamental power, the reality that, if we think about it, is much greater than our self-power. Self-power is referred to as jiriki in Japanese. So this vignette in The Seeker begins by stating, a controversy over faith arose among Honen Shonin's disciples during a tense situation. Sei Kangbo is shocked to hear something Shinran has just said and asks, "What did you say again?" Then Shinran says, I just said that Honen Shonin's faith and mine are exactly one and the same. One of the other disciples then says, "Don't get cocky. How dare you speak such nonsense?" And another says, "On what basis can you say that your faith is identical to Honen Shonin's?" Let me see if I can. And Shinran, actually, during this time that he was studying from Honen, his name was Zenshin. Shinran, or Zenshin, then thinks to himself, how could my faith and Honen's faith not be one and the same? And so then he states to the other followers, as far as human wisdom and learning are concerned, yes, you're right. I can't even begin to compare myself to someone like Honen Shonin, a person with deep wisdom and broad learning like Bodhisattva Manjusri. But the faith I have in the Pure Land comes through Amida's vow. This goes totally beyond my power to save myself. And since this faith is given to us through the power beyond self, I'm sure everyone's faith is one and the same with my own. But the other disciples aren't convinced and ask Honen for his opinion. Honen says, when you look at faith through the eyes of Jiriki, everyone is different. Everyone has different capabilities. However, the faith of Tariki is given by the Buddha equally to any of us ignorant beings. Then on what basis can we say that Zenshin's faith and my faith are different? As such, our faith is one and the same. He says here, those of you so sure you can pull yourself through will stick with your brand of faith, but you may not go to the same Pure Land where I am bound. Take this into your heart. I think this incident, very dramatically shows how Shinran deeply understood Honen's teaching of Tariki. In essence, I think, understanding the concept or the reality of Tariki, this power beyond the self, or we could, instead of using the word Tariki, we could say the Dharma itself, the power of the Dharma, the ultimate truth, reality itself. That understanding Tariki means there's no dualistic teacher-student hierarchy. In our Pure Land tradition, certainly, we have teachers, we have, people who guide us and share their understanding with us, but what they're really sharing is the Dharma itself. And this Dharma represents a wisdom that, entirely transcends our limited human or relative human wisdom. So therefore, in the Shin Sangha, everyone, whether they're a teacher or a student, is simply listening to, or we could say, bowing to, Namo Amida Butsu, bowing to the same Dharma. And I think, what's really notable here in this very short vignette is that what's very moving to me is that since both Shinran and Honen are listening to the same Dharma, and since both Shinran and Honen have a deep appreciation of this teaching of Tariki, then in this sense, there's no separation between them. They are one. And, so it's not surprising that this egalitarian, this non-discriminatory nature of the Honen Sangha, was a very great challenge to the conservative, hierarchical, and elitist schools of the day. And this is ultimately, I think, why he and Shinran were exiled. Honen's all-embracing attitude, his radical non-discrimination, was passed on to Shinran, and it explains, according to Jodo Shinshu scholars and historians, this explains why the Pure Land movement experienced such rapid growth in medieval Japan, and eventually became, the largest Buddhist tradition. So, in concluding my talk, I'd like to say that I hope that you've gotten a little bit of understanding of the significance of Shinran's birth for us today. The model for a Buddhist community that emerged from Honen's and later Shinran's thought was very different from the model of monastic Buddhism. And it was so different that it led to the development of a new kind of Buddhist organization that had a strong, underlying egalitarian principle. And I think as the vignette from the speaker demonstrates, this egalitarian principle itself arose naturally from a deep understanding of the teaching of Tariki, right? Shinran's statement of neither priest nor lay acknowledges that regardless of our status, all of us are ultimately listening to the same transcendent teaching, the same transcendent wisdom of the Buddha. And this, I think, underscores the very non-dualistic and egalitarian nature of the Shin Buddhist Sangha. The Shin Buddhist Sangha is a Sangha that supports the ideal of our underlying human spiritual equality. Thank you for listening. That's my talk for today. Namo Amida Butsu. Well, let's see, as far as announcements, yes, the temple is still closed. And, oh, by the way, I don't know if some of you saw it, but last night there was a fire near the temple, fortunately not, near enough to be a threat to the temple, but I believe it was on Boyd Street on the other side of San Pedro. So maybe a block and a half or so from the temple to the west of the temple. There was a big fire there, and it was on all the news programs. But fortunately, I don't think it affected the temple. But getting back to the closure of the temple, there are, as you know, there are signs that the mandatory closures are slowly being lifted. But we're still in a wait and see mode because we haven't heard yet when temples or houses of worship will be allowed to open. But when that happens, the temple leadership is in discussion right now, and the temple leadership is well aware that before that time, in order to ensure the safety of everyone, there are going to have to be significant changes made to the hondo, and of course to our entry and exit and so forth. We'll have to make some significant modifications and preparations. I think we have a committee assigned to that. But meanwhile, I'm really glad that we're able to continue these online services, continue our services online. And I really sincerely thank you very much for your support and your participation today. And of course, all of us at the temple hope you and your loved ones are staying safe, and maintaining, your sanity as best you can. And we hope to see you all next Sunday. Let's conclude with the Gata Ondoksan 2. Embraced by Amida's great compassion, I respond with gratitude, dedicating my life. Embraced by my dear teachers and the Dharma friends, I must answer gratefully throughout my life. Namo Amida. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida. Namo Amida.